What began as a light-hearted late-night chat quickly spiraled into one of the most uncomfortable, unscripted moments of Prince Harry's public life. And it was all caught on camera. The lights in the studio glowed like a polished stage set. For a royal encounter? Ironic, really. Considering Prince Harry had spent years distancing himself from the palace spotlight. Stephen Colbert, ever the charming provocateur, strutted on stage with his signature grin, prepping the crowd for what was expected to be a sharp, lively, yet harmless exchange. After all, Harry had done dozens of interviews before from Oprah, 2 Netflix documentaries, and while he was no stranger to controversy, the late-night setting promised levity. But as Harry stepped onto the stage, something felt different. He smiled, yes, but it wasn't a relaxed smile. It was tight, weary, as if he knew this would be another performance, one more test in a long line of public reckonings. The moment he sat down, the air changed. Colbert led with humor, joking about coronations and palace scandals, but Harry didn't bite. Instead, he sat forward, fingers locked, posture tense. There was a flicker in his eyes, a mixture of exhaustion and alertness, not fear. Exactly. But something close. And then came the first question, seemingly harmless, but razor-edged in delivery. "Do you ever regret giving it all up?" The crowd chuckled. But Harry didn't. What followed was a silence too long for television. Harry looked at Colbert for a moment, not answering, not blinking. It wasn't the question itself that struck a nerve, he'd been asked that dozens of times, but the tone. The insinuation that he had given up royalty like a spoiled child refusing to eat his vegetables. He finally spoke. "I didn't give it all up. I gave up what was hurting me." The response wasn't loud, but it echoed with quiet rage. Colbert chuckled awkwardly, pivoting, trying to reframe, but it was too late. The wall was up. Harry leaned back, crossing his arms. What was supposed to be a promotional moment had now shifted into something more primal. As questions rolled in about his father, his brother, the British press, Harry's responses grew colder, more clipped. When Colbert joked, but Harry didn't. At one point, when asked about King Charles, Harry visibly recoiled. "That's my father," he said, voice low. Not a headline. Colbert raised an eyebrow, sensing tension, but not yet realizing just how close to the edge Harry really was. Cameras kept rolling. The tension was no longer under the surface. It was in the room. It was on Harry's face. It was about to boil over. As the segment continued, what began as passive discomfort turned into active conflict. Colbert, in his usual style, pushed boundaries, teasing Harry about tabloid drama, Meghan's influence, even the couple's Netflix deal. But it was a single remark that changed everything. "Half joking," Colbert said. "Some might say you're just trading. One spotlight for another, royal drama for Hollywood drama. Do you ever feel like maybe you're just chasing fame on your own terms now?" The audience gasped slightly, sensing the heat rise. Harry's face went blank. There was no smile, no witty comeback, just a deep breath. And then slowly he responded, "Do you think this is fun for me? Leaving my country, burying my mother at 12, being chased, hated, lied about for decades? I didn't choose this. It was never about fame. It was survival." The room went dead silent. Colbert looked stunned, almost regretful. But the damage was done. Harry had broken script. He wasn't promoting anything anymore. He was defending his life. He was done playing nice. But then the mood shifted. Not with a bang, but with a question. Colbert, clearly warming into the interview, leaned forward and asked Harry something that visibly caught him off guard. "When you look at everything you've said about your family, your father, your brother, do you ever worry that maybe, you're just burning bridges you might someday need?" The studio crowd went silent. The smile on Colbert's face was casual, even playful, but the question had teeth, and Harry knew it. His posture straightened, his eyes narrowed just a bit. He wasn't angry, not yet, but something behind his expression cracked, even, if only for a second. He blinked, took a breath, then replied, "I didn't burn the bridges. I just finally stopped pretending they weren't already on fire. The audience reacted a few gasps, some applause, some uncertain laughter, but Colbert pushed on. Still, don't you think the public's growing tired of the royal drama? It was a risky move. Colbert often flirts with discomfort, for the sake of comedy, but this wasn't a joke to Harry. His jaw clenched. His knuckles whitened as he gripped the armrest. In that moment, it was no longer just an interview. It was a confrontation. One where years of tension, trauma, and public scrutiny began to seep through every word. And for Harry, the question wasn't just rude, it felt like betrayal. Another person, another stage, another voice telling him his pain was a performance. Harry hesitated, but just briefly. That pause was all it took for the energy in the room to shift again from curious to cautious. You could almost feel the tension in the air as he adjusted his jacket and leaned slightly forward. I think people are tired, he said quietly, but not of the truth. They're tired of being told how they should feel about it. The words hung in the air. His voice wasn't angry, but firm, resolute. Yet Colbert didn't back down. He nodded thoughtfully, then followed up with a comment that, whether intended or not, was the spark that lit the fuse. But can you see how some might think your story, your truth, is starting to sound rehearsed? That was it. Harry's eyes darted away for a second, then locked back onto Colbert. You could hear a pin drop. The audience wasn't sure whether to laugh or hold their breath, and behind the cameras, producers were exchanging nervous glances. Harry leaned back, then forward again, his expression growing darker. Rehearsed? He repeated. No, what's rehearsed is the silence I was taught to maintain for 30 years. What's new is finally speaking. A murmur of support echoed from the audience, scattered claps, a few wows. But Harry wasn't performing. This was personal now. The kind of moment that you don't prepare for, that no press team can coach you through. And Colbert, sensing the tension, tried to lighten the mood. But it was too late. Something had cracked, and what followed would leave millions stunned. Colbert let out a small, awkward chuckle, the kind a seasoned host uses to glide past an uncomfortable moment, and attempted to pivot, reaching for his blue index cards with a breezy "all right, let's switch gears a bit." But the cards trembled slightly in his hands, betraying his cool exterior. Harry, however, didn't flinch. He kept his eyes locked on Colbert, like a man who had just been cut mid-sentence and refused to be redirected. The silence that followed wasn't dead air. It was heavy, thick with meaning. The audience sensed it. Even the band, usually quick to fill gaps with jazzy transitions, stayed silent. Colbert, trying to salvage control, went for a softer question. Something about fatherhood, about what it's like raising his children outside the royal system, but it backfired. Harry tilted his head, almost confused, before replying, "Do you ask every father on this show if they're raising their kids the right way, or just the ones who walked away from a palace?" The words landed like a punch. Colbert wasn't expecting that. He stammered, "No, I mean, it's just, people are curious, that's all." Harry looked down, exhaled slowly, and then gave a smile, not warm, not amused, but a tight-lipped, exhausted smile that said everything. "They're curious about a version of me they've never met," he said. Linked interviews like, "This don't help." That point, you could almost feel the cameras lose their gloss. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was real, raw, and unraveling in real time. What no one knew was that the most shocking moment was still ahead, and it was only seconds away. The silence that followed felt like the calm before a storm. Colbert, caught between professionalism and discomfort, shuffled in his seat and glanced off camera, possibly hoping for some kind of cue, a sign from the producer's booth, a segment wrap-up, anything. But there was nothing. The moment demanded resolution, and neither man seemed ready to give it. Colbert leaned in once more, his voice noticeably softer, as he offered what sounded like a truce. "I'm not trying to trap you, Harry. I respect what you've done walking away, speaking out. I just think maybe people want to see the man, not the headlines." It was an olive branch, but to Harry, it felt like a trap disguised as empathy. He shook his head slowly. "People don't want to see the man," he said. "They want to see the prince. When I stopped playing that role, they didn't know what to do with me." His words hit with quiet force. It wasn't just a critique of the media or the monarchy, it was a personal confession. One laced with decades of emotional restraint and public performance. And for a moment, Colbert seemed to realize that he had pushed too far. He opened his mouth, maybe to apologize, maybe to pivot again, but he never got the chance. Prince Harry stood up. Not angrily, not theatrically, just firmly, purposefully. He adjusted his jacket and looked directly at the audience. "I think I've said enough," he said. "More than enough, actually." The room froze. You could hear a woman in the front row gasp. Colbert sat speechless. Harry turned toward the exit. And in that moment, no fanfare, no dramatic music, the world watched as a man walked off not just a set, but out of yet another space that tried to define him. Backstage. Chaos erupted the moment Harry disappeared behind the curtain. Producers scrambled, headsets buzzed with confusion, and Colbert's crew stood frozen, unsure whether to cut to commercial, cue the band, or let the cameras keep rolling. On the studio monitors, Harry's figure was still visible for a few seconds, caught in the glow of the exit lights, before vanishing into the shadows. Colbert, meanwhile, was left alone on stage, caught in an eerie pause he hadn't planned for. The audience didn't clap. They didn't laugh. They just sat there, wide-eyed, breath held, trying to figure out if what they'd just witnessed was real or some elaborate bit gone wrong. And then, slowly, Colbert leaned into his mic and offered a half-hearted chuckle. "Well, that happened," he muttered, but his trademark confidence was gone. There was no punchline, no clever pivot, just an echo of something raw left behind in Harry's absence. Within minutes, clips of the walk-off hit social media. A shaky phone recording from a backstage crew member leaked, showing Harry pushing open a heavy side door, his expression blank, jaw tight. Comments flooded in, some in support, praising him for standing up for himself. Others accusing him of being overly sensitive, of dodging tough questions. But behind the noise, something deeper had been exposed. This wasn't just about a celebrity storming off a set. It was about a man who had spent years being silenced, stepping into spaces that claimed to support his truth, only to find that even there, his pain was still up for debate. And this time he decided he'd had enough. In the hours that followed, the internet lit up like wildfire. Hashtags like #PrinceHarryWalkOff and #ColbertClash trended worldwide. News outlets scrambled to reframe the event. Some spun it as a meltdown, others as a calculated publicity stunt. But those who watched the full segment uncut, unedited, saw something else entirely. They saw a man who'd been cornered, too many times finally choosing the exit, not out of weakness, but out of resolve. Behind the scenes, sources close to the show began leaking details. One crew member anonymously stated that Harry had voiced concerns even before stepping on stage, claiming the interview questions felt hostile in tone and rehearsed for tension. Another said Harry had requested a gentler conversation, one focused on healing, family, and growth. But as the interview veered into old wounds and pointed barbs, he realized he was being set up for conflict, not connection. Meanwhile, Buckingham Palace, true to form, issued no comment. But insiders suggested the royal family was quietly pleased by the spectacle Harry, once again appearing unstable on the world stage. To them, it reinforced the narrative they'd been building for years, that stepping away from the firm had made him soft, angry, and unmoored. But to millions watching, it looked like something else. A man exhausted by the weight of his name, no longer willing to sit quietly for the sake of keeping others comfortable. And this time, he didn't just walk away from a conversation. He walked away from the expectation that he always had to endure it. In the days that followed, the fallout from that one moment on The Late Show continued to ripple through headlines and households alike. Stephen Colbert remained unusually quiet. No tweets, no monologue jokes, no backstage recap, just silence. His team issued a short, carefully worded statement thanking Prince Harry for appearing and wishing him well. But it was clear the show had been shaken. Privately, some sources claimed Colbert regretted how the conversation had turned, admitting to colleagues that he'd misread the room, and more importantly misread Harry, but the damage had already been done. Editorials were split down the middle. Some praised Harry's refusal to be the royal scapegoat, while others condemned his reaction as proof he was too fragile for public life. But those close to Harry knew this wasn't about a single question or a single interview. This was about years, decades of swallowing his truth for the sake of public perception. From childhood, Harry had been forced to perform grief, loyalty, and obedience under the harshest lights imaginable. And now, in this strange, in-between space, not royal, not common, he was trying to carve out a new kind of dignity, one that didn't require permission. If walking off that stage cost him media goodwill, so be it. Because for the first time in a long time, Harry was no longer playing a part. He was writing his own script. That walk-off wasn't an ending, it was a declaration. But what the cameras didn't show, and what no late-night recap could capture, was what happened after Prince Harry left the studio. Away from the blinding lights, he walked alone through the back corridors of the theater, trailed only by a single security officer. No entourage, no team spinning damage control. Just Harry, pacing with slow, deliberate steps, shoulders stiff as if he were holding back more than just frustration. One witness later shared that he sat in the back seat of the black SUV for nearly 10 minutes without saying a word, staring out the window at the wet pavement, breathing slowly. The weight wasn't just from that night. It was from years of tension that had never been truly released. And in that moment, there was no Colbert, no palace, no press, just a man reckoning with everything he had tried so hard to outrun. Meghan was reportedly waiting for him at the hotel. She wasn't angry. She didn't ask questions. She simply placed her hand on his and told him, "You did the right thing." And for Harry, that meant more than any headline, any applause, or any royal gesture of approval. It was the validation of a partner who had seen him not as a symbol or a scandal, but as a human being trying to heal. That night, the two of them canceled their remaining media appearances. No statements, no clarifications. Just silence. Intentional silence. Because this time Harry didn't feel the need to explain himself. Cameras had caught enough. In the weeks that followed, something unexpected happened. Prince Harry didn't retreat from the public eye, but he didn't rush back into it either. He let the moment breathe. He let the world talk while he stayed silent. And in that silence, something shifted. Support poured in from unlikely places. Veterans, mental health advocates, even former palace staff who, anonymously or not, admitted they admired what he did. "Walking away takes strength," one retired aide wrote in a viral op-ed. Walking away on live television, when everything in your life has trained you to smile through the pain, that takes more than strength, that takes transformation. And while late-night shows moved on to lighter fare, and tabloids milked every angle of the walk-off, Harry didn't issue a rebuttal. No press release. No interview to set the record straight, because he didn't need to. For once, the moment spoke for itself. And maybe that was the point all along. Maybe Harry wasn't trying to control the narrative. Maybe he was. Letting go of it. Choosing presence over performance. Truth over tolerance. And in a world that's always expected him to explain, excuse, and entertain, he simply left.